I am Benjamin Carter. I am 70 years old. And I am standing at my wife's grave watching them lower a casket that I've just been told is empty. My wife of 45 years, Evelyn, supposedly died of a heart attack. But the note clutched in my hand, slipped to me by a stranger, tells a different story. It says, "I'm alive. I'm not in the coffin." My son Patrick is sobbing beside me. My daughter-in-law Julia is leaning on his arm, devastated. The note says, "Don't trust the children." The casket was closed. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Evelyn, she was vain about her appearance, even in stillness. She would have wanted an open casket of final viewing. My son Patrick had insisted on it being closed. "It's better this way, Dad," he had said, his voice thick with what I thought was grief, "to remember her as she was." I stood there, a 70-year-old man who suddenly felt 90. The cold November air biting at my cheeks. The funeral was quiet, too quiet for a woman like Evelyn. Julia, my daughter-in-law, was weeping hysterically into Patrick's shoulder. Her sobs seemed practiced, too theatrical, like a performance. I looked at her, then at my son, who was staring blankly at the polished cherry wood. I am Benjamin Carter, and for the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger in my own family. Before I continue this story and tell you the dark truth I uncovered that day, please let me know in the comments where in the world you are listening from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever felt that the people closest to you were hiding a terrible secret. Patrick hadn't always been this cold, or maybe he had, and I just refused to see it. I built Carter Logistics from nothing. Just 2 old flatbed trucks and a single contract back in 1975. I worked 18-hour days. I missed birthdays. I missed anniversaries. I poured my sweat and my blood into that company, all for him, all for Evelyn, so they would never have to struggle the way I did. 5 years ago, they staged what amounted to an intervention. "Dad, you've earned a rest," Patrick said, flanked by Julia. "You're 65, retire, hand the company over, let me take the stress." I was tired. Evelyn had agreed with him, her hand gently rubbing my back. "It's time, Ben. Let the boy handle it." So I did. I signed over the CEO role to Patrick. I became a ghost in the $100 million empire I had built. Maybe that was my first mistake, giving up control, believing that rest was what they actually wanted for me. Patrick stepped up to the podium to give the eulogy. His voice cracked. My mother, Evelyn. Her passing was so sudden. He paused, wiping a tear that wasn't there. We are all shattered by this sudden, tragic heart attack. He spoke of her kindness, her charity work. It was a good speech, but it felt hollow. He was describing a woman I didn't fully recognize. He spoke of her as if she were a saint, but my Evelyn was a fighter. She was tough. She was complicated, and she certainly wasn't the type to just die. Not without a fight. As he spoke, I watched Julia. She wasn't looking at Patrick. She was scanning the small crowd. Her eyes darted left and right, like she was looking for someone, or checking if someone was watching. The service ended. The minister said his final words. I stepped forward, taking the small shovel of dirt. My hand was shaking. I was burying my wife of 45 years. As I tossed the dirt onto the casket, it happened. A woman in nurses scrubbed someone I didn't recognize from the hospital, or our lives moved past me. Her shoulder brushed mine. It was intentional. She slipped a small folded piece of paper into the palm of my hand. I froze. Her fingers were cold. She didn't break her stride. She just whispered so low only I could hear, "They are watching. Don't read it here." Don't. Don't. I clenched my fist around the paper. It felt like it was burning a hole in my skin. I looked up. The woman, this Maria, was already disappearing into the crowd, melting away between the tombstones. My heart wasn't just pounding anymore. It was trying to escape my chest. The heavy door of the limousine shut with a soft, final thud. The sound felt like the lid of the casket closing all over again, sealing me into this new hollow reality. I sat heavily on the plush leather, my old bones aching from more than just the cold Ohio air. Across from me, my son Patrick had his arm around his wife Julia. The agonizing theatrical sobs from the graveside had stopped the instant the door closed. It was silent, eerily silent. Then Julia, my daughter-in-law, dabbed her eyes with a delicate black handkerchief. Her makeup, I noticed with a strange sense of detachment, was miraculously still perfect. She leaned in toward Patrick. She whispered, I couldn't hear the words, not all of them, but I saw the movement of her lips. Patrick whispered back. He glanced at his watch. His watch? Who checks their watch while returning from their mother's funeral? My hand, shoved deep in the pocket of my dark wool coat, was clenched around the small, crumpled piece of paper. They are watching. The nurse's words echoed in my head. A frantic warning that didn't make sense. I looked at my children. They weren't watching me. They were planning. I caught a few words this time, fragments floating across the quiet car. Meeting tomorrow and 9:00 a.m. meetings. My wife, my Evelyn, hadn't been in the ground for 30 minutes, and they were already talking about meetings. A cold dread, colder than the November air, crept up my spine. This was too fast, too efficient. I waited. I watched them whisper back and forth, their heads bent together like co-conspirators, not mourners. I felt the paper in my hand. It was my turn. Slowly keeping my hand below the level of the window hidden from their view, I unfurled the note inside my pocket. I angled it toward the weak gray daylight filtering through the tinted glass. My 70-year-old eyes struggled to focus on the hurried, frantic script. 4 words jumped out at me, hitting me with the force of a physical blow. I'm alive. I'm not. My breath hitched. I had to pull the paper further out of my pocket, hiding it behind my hat on my lap. I read the full sentence. I'm alive. I'm not in the coffin. A wave of nausea washed over me. I gripped the armrest, my knuckles turning white. Evelyn alive. No, it was impossible. It was a sick joke, a cruel, twisted prank. I tried to reconstruct the last few days to find the flaw in the logic. The phone call from Patrick. Dad. Mom collapsed. The hospital, the sterile smell of disinfectant and fear. I remembered rushing into the emergency room. Patrick and Julia were already there, standing grim-faced beside a doctor in a white coat. The doctor turned to me, his face a mask of professional sympathy. Mr. Carter, we did everything we could. A massive coronary. She's gone. I remembered buckling. Julia had held me her grip surprisingly strong. She's gone, Dad. She's gone? They led me to the room. I remember wanting to see her, to hold her hand one last time, to tell her I loved her. But the bed there was just a figure under a stark white sheet completely covered. Don't, Dad? Patrick had insisted, his voice breaking. Don't look. The procedures, it's not her anymore. Remember her how she was. I had listened. I was weak with grief. I turned away, blinded by tears, letting my son lead me out of the room. I never saw her face. I never touched her cold hand. I just believed them. My God, had I been burying a stranger? My hand was shaking so violently that the paper rattled. I looked at the note again. There was more. Scrolled below the first message, almost as an afterthought, was the final devastating blow. Don't trust the children. I looked up from the note. I stared at Patrick and Julia. They had stopped whispering. They were looking at me. Julia had a small, tight, unreadable expression. You all right, Dad? She asked, her voice dripping with a fake concern that now sounded grotesque. You look pale. You haven't eaten. I couldn't speak. My son, my daughter-in-law, the 2 people who were supposed to be sharing my grief. The note said not to trust them. The nurse, the actress, had said they were watching. I looked at Patrick. His eyes weren't sad. They were impatient. He was looking past me, out the window toward our house. my house. The limousine slowed. It turned into the long gravel driveway of the home Evelyn and I had shared for 45 years. The house I had built for her. The house Patrick and Julia were now inside hosting a wake for a woman who wasn't dead. The car stopped. The engine went quiet. The chauffeur opened Patrick's door. Julia slid out. Patrick turned to me. "Come on, Dad. Let's get you inside. I was trapped. I was in a car with the very people the note warned me about. I had a secret in my pocket that could destroy everything. I was 70 years old. My wife was supposedly dead but wasn't. And my children were apparently my enemies." The limo door opened on my side. Dad Patrick asked again, his hand extended. I had to get out. I had to walk into that house, surrounded by liars, and pretend I knew nothing. I had to figure out what in God's name I was going to do with this madness. The house was suffocating. It was filled with people I hadn't seen in years, all eating my food, drinking my whiskey, and offering condolences that sounded as hollow as a cheap drum. Fakes, all of them. They murmured about Evelyn's sudden passing and how tragic it was. Their eyes already calculating, wondering what would happen to the company, wondering if Patrick would be an easier boss to manipulate than I had been. I saw Julia moving through the crowd, a perfect portrait of the grieving daughter-in-law accepting hugs. Her eyes rimmed with just the right amount of red. Patrick was by the fireplace looking stoic, already accepting the mantle of man of the house. I couldn't stand it. The note in my pocket felt like a block of ice. I waited for a lull. Then I walked straight to my son. "Patrick, Julia, my study now." My voice was low, but it cut through the murmuring. They both looked startled, annoyed at being pulled away from their performance. I didn't wait. I walked to the study, the one room I hadn't let them change, the one room that was still mine. They followed Julia, already composing her face into an expression of concern. "Dad, is everything okay?" she started. I slammed the heavy oak door behind them. The sound was definitive, cutting us off from the party of liars. The room was suddenly shockingly quiet. I reached into my pocket. My hand was steady now. The tremor was gone, replaced by a cold, hard anger. I didn't just place the note on my antique mahogany desk. I threw it. The crumpled paper skidded across the leather inlay and stopped right in front of them. What I said? My voice a growly whisper? Does this mean Patrick stared at the note confused? Julia glanced at it, and her mask didn't just crack, it shattered. But it wasn't grief that replaced it, it was rage. Her eyes flashed and her face, so perfectly composed, moments before contorted. The tears that came this time weren't silent drops of sorrow. They were hot, angry sobs. "Dad!" She shrieked, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "How dare you? What are you doing?" She wasn't asking a question. She was launching an attack. "My God, Ben!" she cried, using my first name, something she only did when she was furious. "Evelyn is gone. We just put her in the ground and you're in here playing with cruel jokes. What is wrong with you?" It was a brilliant performance. She turned the accusation back on me, painting me as the monster, the one defiling the memory of his mother. Patrick, seeing his wife's opening, quickly adopted his role. He didn't get angry. He became the reasonable one. He sighed a deep, weary sigh and picked up the note, reading the words, "I'm alive," with a look of profound, patronizing pity. "Dad," he said, his voice dripping with the same condescending sympathy I'd heard so many times before. "Dad, you're not well. You've just been through the worst shock of your life." He stepped toward me, trying to put a hand on my shoulder. I recoiled. "You're exhausted." He continued softly, as if speaking to a child. "You're grieving. It's causing hallucinations, Dad. You imagine the nurse. You probably wrote this yourself and don't even remember. It's a classic symptom of grief-induced psychosis." Psychosis hallucinations. Not well. The words hit me. They were treating me exactly like a senile old man. This was the same tactic, the same language they had used 5 years ago to push me out of my own company. Dad, the stress is getting to you. You're forgetting things. You're not as sharp as you used to be. Let Patrick handle it. Just rest. They had wrested me right out of my office, and now they were trying to wrest me right out of my own sanity. They thought I was a fool, an old grieving fool they could manipulate and discard. I stared at their faces, Julia tear-streaked and indignant, Patrick sincere and full of concern. They were a perfect team. For a split second, I almost believed them. The weight of the last few days, the lack of sleep, the sheer impossibility of Evelyn being alive. Maybe I was going crazy. I felt my anger waver, confusion setting in. I looked at the note in Patrick's hand. And then he made his mistake. He smiled a tiny, sad, pitying smile. You just need to rest, Dad. Get some sleep. He started to crumple the note in his fist. Let me take care of this. I'll throw it away so you don't have to look at it and upset yourself anymore. He was too eager, too desperate to destroy the only piece of evidence I had. He wasn't trying to protect my feelings. He was trying to protect his secret. I looked at his hand. The hand crushing the note, and I knew they were lying. I snatched the note from his hand. I snatched it back with a speed that surprised both of them. I'll keep it, I said, my voice flat and cold, devoid of the grief they expected as a reminder of my confusion. I folded the small, crumpled paper and slid it deep into my pants pocket. The atmosphere in the study crackled with unspoken tension. Patrick and Julia exchanged a look, and this time I saw it clearly. It wasn't concern for their father, it was annoyance. Their plan, whatever it was, had hit a snag. Dad, please. Patrick started again, his reasonable voice returning. But I held up a hand, a gesture he knew well from the boardroom. The party is still going on, your guests are waiting. We can talk about my health later. I dismissed them not as a father, but as the founder of the company he was trying to steal. They left Julia shooting me one last look of pure, undiluted frustration. I locked the heavy oak door behind them. I didn't go back out. I stayed in my study, the muffled sound of the fake mourning, the clinking glasses and false sympathies bleeding through the walls. I poured a brandy my hand perfectly steady. I waited. I waited for hours listening as the front door opened and closed as the fake mourners finally left. I waited until I heard the last car pull away, until I heard Patrick and Julia's footsteps on the stairs, their muffled whispers, and the click of their guest room door closing. Only then, in the dead silence of the house, did I emerge. The house was finally truly quiet. But sleep was impossible. Sleep was a luxury for men who weren't at war. And I knew with a certainty that chilled my bones that I was now at war. I walked through the dark, sprawling house. My house, the house I had built for her. Every shadow held a memory of Evelyn. Her sharp laugh by the fireplace, her expensive perfume lingering in the hallway. Was I really grieving? Or was I investigating? I couldn't tell the difference anymore. My mind kept returning to the funeral, to the polished, sealed cherrywood casket. Why was it closed? Patrick's excuse echoed in my head, feeling weaker and more foolish every time I replayed it. An accident during transport, Dad. Damage. It's better this way. A clumsy, stupid lie. Evelyn. My Evelyn was meticulous, almost pathologically vain. She spent $1,000 a month on her appearance. She had clauses in her will, a will I helped her draft, detailing the exact shade of lipstick she was to be buried in. She would never have allowed a closed casket. She would have seen it as the ultimate insult. She would have haunted Patrick for such a failure, unless there was nothing in it, or worse, something that wasn't her. The note in my pocket felt like a block of ice. I'm not in the coffin. I walked up the grand staircase, my feet silent on the thick carpet. I went to our bedroom, the master suite. Her side of the bed was cold, the sheets perfectly smooth as if she'd never been there. I walked into her ensuite bathroom, her sanctuary. I flicked on the bright vanity lights and I froze. It was sterile, empty. Julia's help had been brutally efficient. The marble countertop, usually a cluttered arsenal of expensive jars, vials, and bottles, was wiped clean. I opened the mirrored medicine cabinet, empty. I pulled open the vanity drawers. Empty. Where was her $500 an ounce La Mer face cream, the one she called her magic potion? Where were her prescription sleeping pills? Her signature perfume, the one imported from a tiny shop in Paris that cost a fortune? Julia couldn't have just thrown those things away. That was thousands of dollars in cosmetics. I remembered Julia's words from earlier in the week when I'd first noticed the emptiness, but was too fogged by grief to process it. I took care of it, Dad. She'd set her arm around my shoulder. I didn't want you to have to look at her things. It's too painful. I donated them all to the church charity. Too painful, too fast. This wasn't a daughter-in-law helping her grieving father-in-law. This was a cleanup operation. This was erasing evidence. You don't donate opened half-used jars of $500 cream. You don't clear out a woman's entire existence the day after she supposedly dies. You grieve. You wait. You cry over the small, familiar objects. Julia hadn't cried over them. She had erased them with the cold efficiency of a crime scene cleaner. I stood there in the bright, empty bathroom, the smell of bleach hanging in the air instead of Evelyn's gardenia perfume. Julia hadn't cleaned this place out after Evelyn died. She had cleaned it out before. A person only erases a life with that kind of cold, methodical speed when they know with absolute certainty that the person is never ever coming back. And the only way she could have known that was if Evelyn's sudden heart attack wasn't sudden at all. A week passed, a week of pure, agonizing silence. I played the part of the broken-hearted widower hour. I sat in the living room staring at a television that wasn't on. I let my beard grow. I barely ate. Patrick and Julia would call their voices full of that sickening, false concern. "Are you eating, Dad? Are you sleeping?" I'd mumble something incoherent and hang up. I let them think I was falling apart, that their grief-induced psychosis diagnosis was correct. I let them think I was weak, confused, and defeated. A weak old man is invisible, and I needed to be invisible. I needed to watch, and I needed to listen. The note was now hidden taped beneath the heavy mahogany desk in my study. It was my single burning secret. On Tuesday afternoon, Julia showed up unannounced using her key. "Ben, I brought you some lasagna," she called out, her voice bright and chirpy. Too bright for a woman supposedly mourning her mother-in-law. She found me in the kitchen staring out the window at the gray, dead garden. "Oh, Ben, you look terrible," she said, bustling in all fake sympathy and deficiency. She was wearing a tight cashmere sweater and designer jeans. It was hardly grieving attire. "You need to eat. You're wasting away." She placed the foil pan on the counter and turned to me, putting her hands on her hips, her head tilted. "Now I'm going to stay for a bit, tidy up this kitchen for you. It's a mess." That's when I saw it. It wasn't tucked away. It wasn't hidden. It was displayed proudly. Around her throat, lying against the expensive cashmere, was the Montgomery emerald. My blood didn't just run cold. It turned to ice. It was a flawless, square-cut, deep green emerald, set in heavy antique gold. It had belonged to my mother. It was the only piece of jewelry, the only thing of real value my mother had left me when she died. I had given it to Evelyn on our wedding day. She was hesitant at first. It wasn't her modern style, but she quickly grew to understand its value. It was, she often remarked, the only thing with any class from your side of the family. She wore it to every major event, every gala, every board meeting. It was her power piece. It was her armor. I kept my face blank. I let my gaze drift to it, then away as if I hadn't really processed it. Then I looked back, feigning confusion. Julia, that's a beautiful necklace. She immediately touched it, her fingers tracing the gold setting. A perfect, sad little smile played on her lips. Oh, this toe! She said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, as if sharing a sacred confidence. Evelyn gave it to me. I just stared, letting the lie hang in the air. She took my silence as her cue to elaborate, to weave the fiction. It was a few weeks ago, she said, her eyes welling up with fake tears. We were having one of our long talks. You know how we were. She held my hand and she took it off. Julia paused, taking a shaky breath. She said, Julia, you've been the daughter I never had. I want you to have this. I want you to wear it to feel my strength. A vicious, filthy lie. My mind screamed the words, a daughter she never had. Evelyn despised her. I remember clear as day a conversation from 6 months ago after Patrick had made some disastrous financial decision I'd had to fix. It's that wife of his. Evelyn had hissed, her voice like venom after 2 glasses of Chardonnay. That gold digging has him wrapped around her little finger. She's going to bleed him dry, Ben. She's going to ruin everything we built. Those were her words. That gold digging and the necklace, the emerald. It was more than a lie. It was a sacrilege. I was there in this very house when we signed our wills with my old friend Will Harrison. I remember Evelyn's specific unbending instruction for her burial. Ben, she'd said, tapping the document with her long, manicured finger. I go into the ground with your mother's emeralds. It is not to be given away. It is not for Julia. It gets buried with me. It was her final act of control, her way of taking the one thing she respected from my family, with her ensuring Julia could never, ever get her perfectly manicured hands on it. And here Julia was wearing it. Wearing it while my wife was supposedly lying cold in a casket in the ground. This wasn't a gift. This was a trophy. This was plunder. This was the spoils of war. My eyes dropped from the necklace to her smiling, sympathetic face. She was lying about the necklace. They were lying about the note. They were lying about the closed casket. They were lying about the accident in transport. They were lying about the meetings. They were lying about my health. They were lying about everything. Julia put her hand on my arm, her touch feeling like a spider. Ben, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I looked up at her, at my daughter-in-law, wearing my mother's emerald like a prize. A cold, terrible clarity settled over me. They weren't just lying. They weren't just grieving improperly. They were celebrating. Julia left after I pretended to be too tired to eat the lasagna. The sight of my mother's emerald on her throat burned in my memory. I spent 2 days in that house, a ghost in my own home, just waiting. I was a fisherman now, sitting silently in a boat, waiting for the bobber to sink. I let them think I was broken. I shuffled my feet when I walked. I let my food get cold on the plate. I played the part of the grieving, senile old man they so desperately wanted me to be. A weak old man is invisible, and I needed to be invisible. I needed to watch, and I needed to listen. The call came on Friday morning. It was Patrick. His voice was sharp, businesslike. Dad, we need to talk. It's urgent. I'm coming over. Julia is with me. He didn't ask, he told me. They arrived 20 minutes later. They weren't wearing black anymore. Patrick was in a crisp, dark blue suit. Julia wore a cream-colored blouse. They looked refreshed, energized. They walked right past me in the foyer where I stood pretending to be frail and went straight to the dining room. My dining room. The room with the heavy 12-oot oak table where we had carved Thanksgiving turkeys for 30 years, where Evelyn and I had hosted dinners that decided the future of my company. Patrick spread a sheath of papers across the polished wood. They were glossy, full of colorful, terrifying-looking graphs and spreadsheets. Julia stood beside him, her hand on his back, a united front. "Dad, sit down," Patrick said. He motioned to the head of the table. "My chair," I sat. "Dad," he started. He let out a long, practiced sigh. He ran his hand through his perfectly cut hair. "I hate to do this, especially now with Mom with everything, but we have a serious problem." He looked at Julia, who nodded, her face a perfect mask of solemn concern. "It's the company, Dad." He tapped the papers. "It's in trouble. Deep trouble." And the word just hung in the air. Trouble, Carter, logistics. My mind raced. I had reviewed the fourth quarter projections just last month before she died. We were projecting a record year, $300 million in gross revenue. I'd spent 4 decades building that company into a fortress, diversifying our contracts, meticulously managing our debt. It was a lean, powerful, efficient machine. It couldn't be in trouble. "I don't understand," I said. My voice was deliberately weak, confused. "I know, Dad. It's a shock." Patrick tapped one of the spreadsheets, a horrifying graph that showed a steep red nosedive. "It's these numbers. They're bad. We've lost the Apex contract and the GMR freight line. They both canceled this week. A lie. A blatant, stupid lie. The Apex contract was my masterpiece. I had negotiated it myself 5 years ago. It was a 10-year ironclad agreement. They couldn't just cancel. It would cost them $50 million in penalties in GMR. We had been their exclusive carrier since 1998. It made no sense. He was counting on me being too old and too grieving to remember the details. It's a cash flow crisis." Patrick continued gaining momentum now, the words flowing faster. "And then there's Mom." He looked down, pausing for the perfect dramatic beat, faking a moment of pain with her passing the estate taxes. "Dad, the government is going to hit us hard. We're looking at a massive, massive bill. The company just doesn't have the liquidity to survive the hit. We'll be bankrupt in 6 months. Estate taxes." He was lying to me about estate taxes. Evelyn and I had spent nearly a decade with the best lawyers in Ohio, setting up a complex series of irrevocable trusts. We did it specifically to ensure the company would pass to him seamlessly to protect it from this exact scenario. He knew this. He signed those trust documents. He was either the most incompetent CEO in American history, or he thought I was a complete and utter fool. I looked at the forged numbers. I looked at the fake crisis. I felt a strange cold calm settle over me. "So," I said, my voice barely a whisper, What are you suggesting, son?" He took a deep, shaky breath, playing the part of the reluctant executioner. "We have to sell Dad," he said it fast. "It's the only way to protect what's left, to pay the taxes, to salvage anything." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "I know it's your legacy. It's breaking my heart, but it's the only option." I stared at the papers, pretending to be overwhelmed, a broken old man seeing his life's work evaporate. I was silent for a full minute. The silence stretched. Patrick started to squirm. Just as I was about to speak, Julia jumped in. Her voice was suddenly bright, chirpy, cutting through the manufactured gloom like a spotlight. "But there's good news, Ben," she said. "Good news. My company was supposedly bankrupt, and she had good news. Patrick has been working tirelessly," she cooed, placing her perfectly manicured hand on his arm. "And he's found a buyer, a really wonderful, generous offer." "A buyer?" I asked already. "Yes," Patrick said, his relief so thick I could almost touch it. "A major investment group. They've been watching us for a while. They're called Global Century Holdings. They've agreed to take on the debt, handle the taxes, and still give us a very generous payout. It's a miracle, Dad." They were too eager. They were too prepared. The solution had arrived with the problem. This wasn't a crisis. This was a script, and they had just handed it to me. A miracle. That's what he called it. I stared at the glossy, colorful graphs. The steep, downward plunging red line looked like a fabricated wound painted onto the page to scare me. Global Century Holdings. The name sounded absurdly grand, like something a 20-year-old would invent in a boardroom fantasy. They were too prepared. The problem and the solution had arrived in the same briefcase. My grief, my confusion, my sility. This was the fog they were counting on to push this through without a single question. I needed to test them. I needed to see how hard they would push back. I slowly, deliberately put my hand on top of the pile of papers. Patrick's hand flinched, as if my touch had burned him. I looked up, letting my eyes clear, trying to inject a moment of my old authority into my voice. "Let me see the books," I said. The change in the room was instant. The air filled with their fake sympathy suddenly became sharp and cold. Julia's practiced smile tightened at the corners. Patrick sighed. It was not a sad sigh. It was a sigh of profound, utter annoyance. He sat back in his chair, rubbing the bridge of his nose as if dealing with a stubborn, difficult child. "Dad," he said, his voice laced with that same patronizing tone he'd used in the study. "I really don't think that's necessary." I just stared at him. "Let me see the books, Patrick. All of them. The ledgers, the P&L statements, the Apex contract. I want to see the cancellation clause they supposedly invoked." Patrick actually laughed. It was a short, sharp, dismissive sound. "Dad, you've been retired for 5 years. 5. He tapped the glossy spreadsheet with his pen. "This isn't your old paper and pencil ledger book. This is integrated cloud-based accounting. It's SAP. It's multi-layered. It's complex." He leaned forward, lowering his voice as if sharing a gentle secret. "Honestly, Dad, you wouldn't understand it." My hands clenched under the table. I wouldn't understand. Benjamin Carter wouldn't understand. I was the man who, in 1982, had personally flown to California and sat with a team of pimply 20-year-old kids to design the first custom logistics and accounting software for this company. I was the one who taught him, Patrick, how to read a balance sheet when he was 15. I had built this fortress, and now the prince was telling the king he didn't understand how the drawbridge worked. "Try me," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "I may be old, son, but I'm not stupid." Patrick's patience snapped. "Dad, we don't have time for this," he said, his voice rising. "We are in a crisis. The estate taxes are looming. This generous offer from Global Century is on the table now. They aren't going to wait around for weeks while you play amateur accountant and try to understand the software." He was flustered. He was pushing too hard too fast. He was making mistakes. Before I could respond, Julia slid into the conversation. The good cop to his bad cop. Her voice was pure honey, thick and sweet and poisonous. "Ben, darling," she cooed, placing her soft manicured hand over my old calloused one on the table. "Please, Patrick is under so much pressure." She looked at me, her eyes wide and pleading. "He's trying to save this family. He's trying to save your legacy. He's trying to protect you from all of this." She squeezed my hand. "That's why you handed the company over to him, isn't it? Because you trust him." "You said you trusted him." Her words were a perfectly crafted trap using my own past decisions, my own love for my son against me. She was reminding me of my role, the retired, trusting, grieving father. Don't worry your head about all these nasty numbers, Ben." She whispered, her voice like silk. "Let Patrick handle the burden. He's strong. He can do it. All you have to do is sign. Just sign, and it will all be over. We can finally properly grieve." They were shutting me out actively. They weren't just presenting a solution. They were forcing it. They were using my grief as a weapon and my retirement as a cage. They were counting on me being too broken to fight back, too old to see the con. They were hiding something big, something worth $300 million. I looked from Patrick's impatient, angry face to Julia's sweet, manipulative one. I felt the note in my pocket, "Don't trust the children." I felt the phantom weight of my mother's emerald on Julia's throat. They are celebrating. I looked back at the glossy fake reports. A miracle. Global Century Holdings. It all clicked into place. This wasn't a desperate sale. This was a hostile takeover, and it was coming from inside my own house. I pulled my hand out from under Julia's. I stood up slowly, letting my old age disguise the sudden cold rage coursing through me. I picked up the stack of papers. I need time to think. I stammered, playing my part. This is all too much. I turned and shuffled out of the dining room, clutching the fake reports to my chest. They didn't follow. I heard Patrick let out an exasperated sigh as I left. He thought he'd won. He thought I was just a confused old man going to his room to nap. He was wrong. I walked into my study. I locked the door. I sat behind my desk. And I decided right then that the grieving, confused, senile old Benjamin Carter was officially dead. It was time for the founder of Carter Logistics to get to work. I didn't shuffle back to my study. I walked out the front door, past the fake mourners who were still lingering, got into my Cadillac and drove. I didn't drive to the club. I didn't drive to the office. I drove to the other side of town, to a part of Cleveland I hadn't seen in years. I parked in front of the Terminal Cafe, an old diner with a flickering neon sign. The kind of place that smelled of stale coffee and bacon grease. The kind of place Patrick and Julia, with their upscale tastes and pristine lives, wouldn't be caught dead in. It was perfect. I slid into a cracked vinyl booth in the back, ordered a black coffee I didn't want, and pulled out my phone. I scrolled past Patrick's number. I scrolled past the company's legal counsel, Daniel Harrison, a man Patrick had recommended 5 years ago, a man who was probably in on this. I went deep into my contacts to a name I hadn't called in years. William Will Harrison, no relation to Daniel. Will was my friend for 40 years. We'd built our careers together, him and LawMe and logistics. He was the one who drafted my first contract, the one who'd been at the hospital when Patrick was born. I'd stopped using his firm for corporate matters when I retired, letting Patrick bring in his own new blood, Daniel. Another mistake. My finger hovered over the call button. I was about to cross a line. I was about to declare war on my own son. I pressed the button. He answered on the second ring, his voice the same as it had always been. Gruff, non-nonsense. "Ben, is that you?" "It's been a while." "Everything okay, my friend?" My throat tightened. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. "Ben, you there?" He asked, a note of concern entering his voice. Will I finally manage to say, my voice cracking? Will I need help. I think I'm being scammed. I could hear him shift in his chair. Scammed by who? Some email prince? What's going on? I took a deep, shaky breath. No, Will. Not by a stranger. I paused, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I think I'm being scammed. By my own son, by Patrick. There was dead silence on the other end of the line. Will, who was never at a loss for words, was speechless. Ben. He finally said, his voice flat. All trace of friendliness gone, replaced by the lawyer I knew he was. Start from the beginning and don't leave a single detail out. So I told him everything. The closed casket, the accident in transport, the nurse at the funeral, the note, "I'm alive." Don't trust the children. Patrick and Julia's immediate diagnosis that I was senile and hallucinating. Their desperation to destroy the note. The eerily empty bathroom stripped clean of Evelyn's possessions before she was even in the ground. And then the final damning piece of evidence. She was wearing the emerald will. I said, my voice breaking with rage. Julia, she wore my mother's emerald to my face and told me Evelyn gave it to her. I heard Will let out a long, slow whistle. Evelyn gave it to her. The same Evelyn who told me in your presence that she'd rather be buried in a landfill than let that gold digging touch her jewelry. That's the one, I said bitterly. And now today they cornered me. They showed me fake spreadsheets will fake. Told me the company I built, our $300 million company, is bankrupt, and that we have to sell. Sell to who will ask his voice, like ICE. A miracle buyer, a group called Global Century Holdings, that just happened to be waiting in the wings. I heard the furious scribbling of a pen on a legal pad. And when I asked to see the books, I finished. Patrick told me I wouldn't understand the new software. He treated me like a child. They're trying to push me out, Will. They're lying about Evelyn, and they're stealing my company. Will was silent for another 10 seconds. When he spoke again, he was the man I remembered from my toughest contract negotiations. He was a shark. All right, Ben, he said. Here's what we do. You are not going crazy. You are being played. And we're going to play back harder. What do we do? I asked, feeling a sliver of strength return. You, Ben, you do nothing. You go back home. You play the part. You are the broken, confused, senile old man. You agree to nothing but you stall. You tell them you're too upset. You need time. You become the grieving victim they want you to be. Understood. Understood. I said, good. Will continued. Because while you're playing possum, I'm building a team. A team Patrick doesn't know exists. A team that answers only to us. I'm calling Leo Vance. Remember him, ex-Cleveland PD now? The best damn PI in the state. He'll be discreet. I want him to find out who this Maria nurse really is and who hired her. I want him to dig into Global Century Holdings. I want to know who is behind that curtain. He wasn't finished. And second, I'm calling Mr. Shaw, a Leicester Shaw. He's a forensic accountant, a bloodhound. He finds money trails that don't exist. Patrick thinks he's locked you out of the software. Shaw will get in. He'll go through the server logs, the balance sheets, the offshore accounts. We are going to conduct a full secret illegal if we get caught audit of your own company. The plan was audacious. It was dangerous. It was exactly what I needed, okay? Will, I said, feeling my spine straighten. Do it, it's done. Will said. The war has started, Ben. Now go home, lock your doors, and be the saddest, most confused old man they've ever seen. I hung up the phone. The bitter diner coffee suddenly tasted good. The secret investigation was officially underway. I drove back to the house. The taste of stale diner coffee bitter in my mouth. The adrenaline from my meeting with Will Harrison had faded, replaced by a cold, heavy resolve. I parked the Cadillac in the garage right next to Evelyn's spotless, untouched Lexus. As I walked into the house, the silence felt different. It was no longer the silence of grief. It was the silence of a hunting ground. Patrick and Julia were gone back to their own home. Good. I needed the stage to myself. I walked into the study and sat in my deep leather chair, the one that smelled of old books and my cigarillos. I let my shoulders slump. I practiced letting my face go slack, my eyes unfocused. I practiced the tremor in my hand that I had seen in old friends, the ones who had truly lost their minds. I had to become the man they thought I was, the man they needed me to be. The grieving, confused, senile old Benjamin Carter. This was the hardest performance of my life. I was about to perform for an audience of 2, and my life's work was on the line. I waited 4 hours. I let the afternoon bleed into evening. I let them wonder. I let them stew. I let them imagine I was upstairs broken and sobbing, perhaps contemplating the end. When the clock in the hall chimed 7, I picked up the phone. My fingers felt heavy. I dialed Patrick's number. He answered on the first ring, so eager. Dad, he said, his voice a sharp, anxious spike. Dad, are you okay? You just walked out. Julia and I, we've been worried sick. Worried sick. The lie was so reflexive, so easy for him. I let out a long, shaky sigh. I made sure he could hear the sound of a broken man, the sound of a man who had given up. Patrick's son. I started letting my voice tremble. I've been sitting here thinking about what, Dad? He asked, his voice cautious, afraid I might be about to fight him again. You're right, I whispered. I let the words hang weak and defeated. You're right, I can't. I sniffed a wet, pathetic sound. I can't look at those numbers. All those spreadsheets. It's too much. It's too much, son. I let a beat of silence pass, as if I was fighting back tears with your mother gone. I'm just so tired. I'm so very tired. The silence on the other end was electric. I could visualize him, his hand tightening on his phone. A slow smile of victory spreading across his face. He thought I was caving. He thought I was finally broken. Oh, Dad. He said, his voice instantly softening, switching on the caring son persona like a light switch. Dad, it's okay. I understand. I know it's a lot. I'm not mad that you walked out. I'll handle everything, I promise. Yes. I said, my voice small and ready. You handle it. You were right. I wouldn't understand all that knew that software anyway. Just sell it. I let that sink in. Sell the company. I trust you. Just take care of it all, please. I heard it. It was faint, but it was unmistakable. A quick, sharp exhale of air. Relief. The sound of a hunter whose prey had just walked calmly into the snare. He thought I was done. He thought he had won. Thank you, Dad. Patrick said, his voice thick with fake warmth. You won't regret this. I'll make sure you're taken care of for the rest of your life. Oh, I bet you will. I thought. You'll take care of me, all right. Now the hook? The real trap, Patrick. I said just as he was about to hang up, my voice deliberately frail. Yes, Dad. Anything. There's just one thing. I let my voice sound hesitant, like an old man's last foolish request. These men, the buyers, this global century. Yes, he asked, a new note of impatience creeping in. I'd like to meet them, I said, before I sign the final papers, not to interfere. No, just to shake their hands, to look them in the eye. I paused, letting the fake emotion build. Your mother, Evelyn. She always said, you can tell a man's worth by his handshake. I just need to know. I need to know my legacy. My whole life's work is going to good people. It's a silly old man's request. I know. The line went quiet again. This time the silence was different. It was suspicion. I had asked for something off script, Dad Patrick said slowly. I don't think that's necessary. They're very busy men. It's a corporation. There's no one person to shake hands with. It's just lawyers. And please, son, I begged, letting my voice crack, playing my final card. It's the last thing I'll ever ask of you regarding the company. If I can't just meet them, I don't know if I can sign. It feels wrong. I'm spitting on your mother's grave without knowing who I'm selling to. I threw in Evelyn's name. That was the master stroke. He couldn't refuse now without looking like a monster. He let out another sigh. This one clearly genuinely frustrated. Okay, he said, his voice tight. Okay, Dad, fine. You're right. It's a good idea. A nice touch. They'll appreciate the gesture. I knew he was lying. He was annoyed, but he was trapped. I'll set it up, he said. A quick meet and greet before the signing. Of course, that's a great idea. Thank you, son. I whispered. You're a good boy. I love you. I hung up the phone. The performance was over. I sat back in my chair, my hands no longer shaking. The trap was set. Now all I needed was the proof to spring it. I told Patrick I needed to go to the drugstore. The pretense of picking up a new prescription was the only way I could get out of the house. I had to assume they were watching me or at least tracking my car. I left my Cadillac in the garage. Instead, I walked the 4 blocks to the main street and took a city bus transferring twice until I was on the west side in the industrial sector. The sun was setting, casting long, ugly shadows over the warehouses and rusted chain-link fences. The Terminal Cafe was just ahead, its neon sign flickering like a dying heartbeat. I went in, but I didn't sit down. I walked straight past the counter through the kitchen, earning a shout from the cook and out the back exit. The alley was dark. A single bare bulb high on the wall cast a weak yellow circle of light. A dark gray sedan was parked 20 ft away, its engine off. As I approached, the passenger door clicked open. I got in. The man inside didn't look at me. He was in his 60s, wearing a worn tweed jacket, and the car smelled of stale coffee and profound patience. This was Leo Vance, the man Will Harrison called a bloodhound. He thinks I'm senile, I said, my voice no longer the frail, reedy whisper I'd been practicing. It was cold hard. He thinks I'm a confused old man who doesn't understand software. Leo Vance just grunted, turning his heavy-lidded eyes toward me. They all think that he said, right up until the moment the cuffs go on. She was at the funeral, I said, getting straight to business. Dressed as a nurse. 40s dark hair, maybe Hispanic. She gave me the note. The one about your wife being alive, and the one about my children being liars, I confirmed. I need to know who she is, and more importantly, I need to know who hired her. Leo stared out the windshield into the darkness. You got a name? If I had a name Leo, I wouldn't be paying your outrageous hourly rate. He allowed himself a small, thin smile. Fair enough, Mr. Carter. Sure. You're paying me to find a ghost in a nurse's uniform at a funeral. That's new. Just find her Leo, I said. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes, he echoed. I got out of the car and walked back through the diner, disappearing into the city night. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I was a prisoner in my own home, playing the role of a fading patriarch. Patrick and Julia were disgustingly attentive. They brought meals I didn't eat. They offered to read the newspaper to me as if my eyes had suddenly failed. Dad, the meeting with Global Century is set for next Monday. Patrick announced one evening, his voice full of false brightness. We'll all go to the office. You'll meet Mr. Henderson, their representative. You can shake his hand just like you wanted. Then we sign, and all this stress, it's over. I nodded meekly from my armchair. That's good, son. That's good. You're a good boy, Patrick. He smiled, satisfied. He actually patted me on the head like a dog. The moment he and Julia left, I went to my study and checked the burner phone Will Harrison had given me. Nothing. The call came on the 4th day, a Thursday. I was in the garden pretending to look at Evelyn's dead roses when the burner phone vibrated in my pocket. I hurried inside, locking myself in the bathroom. Yeah, I answered. It was Leo. His voice was flat, professional. I got her. I felt my knees weaken. Who is she? Her name is Maria Sanchez. She's not a nurse. Never has been. My heart hammered. What is she? She's an actress, Leo said. A stage actress, mostly. Does some local commercials. She's deep in debt, desperate for work. She said it was the easiest $500 she ever made. $500, the price of the note that had shattered my world. Who hired her, Leo? Who paid her, I demanded. That's where it gets interesting. Leo said, his voice dropping. She says she never saw a face. It was an anonymous hire. A man in a dark car, in a parking garage, cash in an envelope, classic anonymous setup. He gave her the uniform, the note, and the script. A dead end. I felt my hope crash. So we have nothing. We don't know who sent it. I didn't say that, Leo said, and I could almost hear his thin smile. She's an actress, Ben. She's trained to listen. She said the man was on his phone when she was walking away. He was angry. He He was whispering, but she heard him. My hand gripped the phone. What did he say? Leo, she said he was clearly working for someone else. He was nervous. She heard him say, and I quote, "I've handled the old man. The Global Century account is secure. Tell them the asset is ready for transfer." I leaned against the cold bathroom tile, the world tilting slightly. Global Century, the company, the buyers. Leo, I said, my mind racing. Are you telling me the buyers are the ones who sent the note? That's what the woman heard Ben. I hung up the phone, my mind a whirlwind. It wasn't Evelyn, it wasn't Patrick, it was the buyers. They were the ones who sent the warning. They were the ones who told me not to trust my children. Why would the people trying to buy my company warn me that my son was a thief? It made no sense. It was a contradiction. Unless this wasn't a simple sale. Unless the buyers and my son weren't on the same side. Unless this was a war. And I was just now realizing I wasn't even fighting the right enemy. The call from Will Harrison came late on Friday. His voice was grim, stripped of all friendliness. "Shaw's in. He found things. Meet us." The safe house wasn't a spy movie hideout. It was something infinitely more depressing. A generic rented office space on the 32nd floor of a glass tower downtown, smelling of new industrial carpet and stale air. It was anonymous, sterile, and perfectly secure. I walked in feeling like an old man again, not a warrior. The last 3 days of playing the confused patriarch had been draining. I was exhausted not just from my performance, but from the terrifying riddle that kept spinning in my head. Why would the buyers warn me? It didn't make sense. I was walking into this meeting blind and I hated it. Will was there standing by the window staring down at the city lights. He was nursing a lukewarm coffee from a styrofoam cup. He looked like he hadn't slept either. The man sitting at the bland laminate conference table was the opposite. He was small, precise, and looked immaculate. He wore thin, wire-rimmed glasses, a perfectly pressed white shirt, and a muted gray tie. He looked like, well, an accountant. He didn't look like the bloodhound Will had promised. This was Alistair Shaw. Shaw didn't stand up when I entered. He didn't offer condolences. He didn't waste a single second on pleasantries. He simply gestured to the chair opposite him and opened a thin black binder. "Mr. Carter," he said. His voice was quiet, precise, and utterly devoid of emotion. Like a machine reading a verdict, he slid a single summary sheet across the table. I didn't sit down. I stared at the paper. "Let's start with the simple part," Shaw said. "The part you already suspect. Your son Patrick is a thief." I had expected it. I had known it ever since Julia flashed my mother's emerald. I knew it when Patrick told me I wouldn't understand the software. But to hear it spoken aloud as a cold, professional fact, a thief. My son. The boy I taught to ride a bike. The boy I put through Wharton, paying tuition that cost more than my first house. A common dirty thief. I finally sat down, my legs feeling weak. How I forced the word out. "It's not sophisticated." Shaw continued ignoring my shock, his finger tracing a line on the summary. "Frankly, it's clumsy, amateurish. He and his wife Julia have been siphoning money for exactly 24 months. The theft began the week you officially gave him full signatory power." He laid out the mechanism with clinical detachment. Fake invoices, shell companies set up by Julia under her maiden name, Synergy Analysis LLC, Logistics, expediting partners, vague, meaningless corporate buzzwords that masked the simple, ugly truth. They were paying themselves for consulting services that were never rendered. "How much?" I asked, my voice a hoarse whisper. $4,072,000 and change. Will Harrison swore a sharp, violent word that cut through the sterile air. I just felt cold numb. $4.5 million. It was enough to hurt. They stole from me. They stole from the company I built. They had looked me in the eye day after day, week after week, all while their hands were deep in my pockets. Where did it go? Will asked, his voice growly. Where it always goes, Shaw said, tapping another folder. Belize, Panama, a small bank in the Cayman Islands. Standard offshore accounts. They'd been bleeding the company about $200,000 a month. They were getting sloppy, Mr. Carter, greedy. This? He tapped the fake spreadsheet Patrick had given me, the one showing the nosedive. This crisis is real, but they created it. I put my head in my hands. It all made sense now. The fake crisis, the urgent need to sell. They weren't selling because the company was failing. They were selling it to cover their tracks. They had stolen the cash flow, and now they were going to sell my entire $300 million empire just to hide their own $4 million theft. It was pathetic. It was the act of a desperate, stupid child. My son, my own son, who had stood in my dining room, pointing at graphs that charted his own larceny. He had blamed the economy. He had blamed me. He had patted me on the head. I looked up at Shaw, my eyes burning. Then that's it, I said, my voice. He's a thief. He's selling the company to hide the theft. We call the police. I started to stand up. Case closed. Shaw looked at me over the rim of his glasses. He hadn't moved. He hadn't flinched. No, Mr. Carter, he said softly. Will stopped pacing. What? What do you mean? No, $4.5 million isn't case closed. No, Shaw repeated. He slid the summary of Patrick's theft to the far side of the table, dismissing it like a piece of trash. That's not the real story. This, he tapped the thick black binder in front of him. This is just noise. It's a distraction. It's what they wanted you to find. I stared at him. A distraction. $4.5 million is a distraction. Yes, Shaw said, his voice dropping, because this pathetic, clumsy theft is just a symptom. Your son and daughter-in-law, they're just petty thieves. They're amateurs. The real thief, the one who's actually bankrupting your company, is a professional, a ghost. And they, he said, opening the binder to the first page, are far, far more sophisticated. I stared at the little accountant, my mind refusing to process the word. A distraction. My voice was hoarse. $4.5 million is a distraction. Shaw pushed his wire-rimmed glasses up his nose, his expression as flat and cold as the tabletop. No, Mr. Carter, it's not a distraction. It's a smoke ox screen. It's the bread and circuses. It's the thing the magician wants you to watch while the real trick is happening somewhere else. Will Harrison leaned forward, his heavy hands gripping the edge of the table. Spit it out, Shaw. What's the real trick? Shaw took a slow, deliberate breath. Your son and his wife are panicking, he said, looking at me. They are genuinely terrified. The company is collapsing. The numbers they showed you, the nosedive. It's all real. I was lost. But you said the contracts weren't canceled. You said, I said, Patrick's theft of $4.5 million didn't cause this crisis. Shaw interrupted, his voice sharp and precise. He and his wife are just rats scurrying away with scraps from a ship that is already sinking. They are panicking because they are watching the company bleed cash, and they think they are the ones causing it. They're not. They're just amateurs. They're not smart enough to pull off what's really happening. He slid another much thicker folder into the center of the table. While your son was busy creating fake invoices for consulting services in BICE, someone else was moving real money. He opened the folder. It wasn't simple spreadsheets. It was complex wire transfer records, shipping manifests, and currency exchange reports. Your company hasn't lost any contracts, Mr. Carter, but it has been paying for services it never received. While Patrick was stealing $200,000 a month, someone else, a ghost, has been stealing $5 million at a time. Will Harrison let out a low, strangled oath. $30 million, Shaw said, tapping the final summary page. In the last 6 months alone, that's the real reason the company is out of cash. That's why your son is in a panic trying to sell the company before the auditors find the hole. He just doesn't realize he's only responsible for a tiny fraction of it. My mind was spinning. How does $30 million just disappear? Patrick is the CEO. He would see that Shaw said a flicker of something almost admiration in his eyes. That is the beautiful, terrible genius of the plan. The ghost didn't hide the transfers. The ghost disguised them as your son's theft. I didn't understand. Shaw the ghost routed the $30 million through the exact same offshore banks your son was using in Bice and Panama. The ghost used shell companies with names similar to the ones your daughter-in-law created. The ghost made his massive professional withdrawals look like the clumsy, obvious theft of your son. It's a masterpiece of financial misdirection. When the company finally defaults and the FBI is called in, who do you think they will blame? It hit me. A wave of ice and fire. They'll blame Patrick, I whispered. They'll see his $4.5 million theft, and they'll pin the entire $34.5 million on him. They'll think he was just better at hiding the rest. Precisely, Shaw said. A master thief setting up a petty, greedy fool to take the fall for the entire heist. Patrick is so terrified of you discovering his crime that he's racing to sell the company, which is exactly what the master thief wants him to do. The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture so monstrous I could barely look at it. The note, "Don't trust the children, the nurse, the buyers." The note, I said, my voice shaking. The nurse. Leo said she heard the name Global Century. The buyers. The buyers are the ones who warned me. They're trying to help me help you. Shaw let out a dry, humorless laugh. No, Mr. Carter. They're not trying to help you. They're trying to focus you. I don't understand. The note, Shaw said, was the most brilliant part of the plan. The ghost knew your son was stealing. So they sent you the note. They pointed you like a loaded gun right at Patrick. They wanted you to dig. They wanted you to find his $4.5 million theft. They wanted you to create a family war to put all the focus on Patrick as the villain. It's the perfect smoke-act screen. While you're busy fighting your son, the real enemy is walking away with the entire bank. My God, I had been played. We had all been played. Evelyn, me, Patrick, we were all just puppets. So Will set his voice low. It all comes back to the buyers. Who the hell are Global Century Holdings? Shaw closed his binder. The quiet, precise little accountant suddenly looked like the most dangerous man I had ever met. That's the final piece, he said. I ran the trace. Global Century is not a real company. It's a shell, a phantom registered in Delaware funded by an anonymous trust in Zurich. It's a ghost created for one purpose and one purpose only: to buy Carter Logistics for pennies on the dollar right after the ghost's other operation finishes looting it. So it's a dead end. I said, the hope draining out of me. The owner is anonymous. Not quite, Shaw said. He pulled one last piece of paper from his coat pocket. They're anonymous now, but when they set up the shell company 6 months ago, they had to pay a $10,000 setup fee, and they made one tiny mistake. The transfer didn't come from the anonymous Zurich Trust. It came from a personal account. He slid the paper across the table. It was a copy of a simple bank transfer. I've been tracking the owner of Global Century Holdings, Mr. Carter, the person who's buying your company. I looked down at the paper. I read the name listed as the sender of that $10,000 fee. And my world, which I thought had already been destroyed, imploded. Mr. Carter, Shaw said softly, you are not going to believe who really owns the company that's about to buy yours. I stared at the single piece of paper, the copy of the bank transfer, the $10,000 setup fee for Global Century Holdings, the sender's account. I read the name, but my mind refused to assemble the letters into a person I knew. E.M. Carter. It meant nothing. A stranger, a ghost. I don't understand. I whispered, my voice sounding distant. Who is E.M. Carter Alistair Shaw? The small, precise accountant looked at me over the rim of his glasses. That's the shell registration, he said. A legal fiction designed to be untraceable. But the bank account the setup fee was paid from, that's much harder to hide. They made a mistake. A small one, but they made it. He slid another piece of paper across the laminate table, a bank statement. The account opened 30 years ago is registered to I read the full name. Evelyn Marie Carter, my wife. The room didn't just go silent, it imploded. The air was sucked out of my lungs. I couldn't breathe. I heard a sound, a violent screech of wood against carpet. Will Harrison, my friend of 40 years, had shot up from his chair, his face purple, with sudden choking rage. "Evelyn!" he roared, his voice cracking. "Shaw, that's impossible. That's insane. She's dead. Ben and I, we just buried her." We were at the funeral. Will was pacing, his big hands clenched into fists, but I wasn't watching him. I was frozen. The note, the small crumpled piece of paper that woman had slipped into my hand at the graveside. The note that Patrick had tried to snatch, that I had dismissed as a cruel prank or a delusion of my grief-induced psychosis. The words flashed in my mind, burning like a brand. I'm alive. I'm not in the coffin. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a hallucination. It was the literal, god-awful truth. "She is not dead, Mr. Carter," Shaw said, his voice cutting through my spiraling shock with the cold precision of a scalpel. "She is very much alive, and according to her credit card statements, which I also pulled, she is currently enjoying a very expensive lunch at a resort in the Cayman Islands." Will Harrison looked like he was going to have a stroke. But the body, he stammered. "The hospital, the doctor, the casket, Shaw, I saw the casket. You saw a box." Shaw corrected him, his voice chillingly calm. "A closed, sealed cherry wood box, which, by the way, was mandated by your son." He pulled another document from his thick black binder, a copy of a wire transfer. "This," he said, "is a payment for $50,000. It was sent from one of Evelyn's secret accounts, one she opened last year under her maiden name 2 days before her sudden heart attack." My throat was dry. I could barely form the words. Who did it go to?" "A Dr. Alistair Finch," Shaw said, reading the name. "The attending physician at St. Jude's, the same doctor who officially pronounced your wife dead upon arrival." He slid another paper across the table, and this one a $100,000 transfer sent the same day to the Green Valley mortuary. The blood drained from my face. Green Valley. The mortuary Patrick had insisted on using. They handled a friend's funeral dad. He'd said, "They're very efficient." Efficient? My God. The doctor was paid to sign a fake death certificate. Will said, his voice a low, horrified growl. He finally sank back into his chair, his face ashen. "And the body," I whispered. The woman in the casket, the mortuary provided one," Shaw said without blinking. "They're accommodating. For a $100,000, they sourced an unclaimed Jane Doe from the city morgue. A woman with no family, no name, roughly Evelyn's height and age. They put her in the box. They ensured a quick, clean process. Sealed casket, no viewing, and a cremation scheduled immediately after. No evidence, no questions asked. A perfect, seamless transaction. I saw it all. The scene in the hospital. The white sheet pulled over a face I never saw. Patrick steering me away. Julia holding me, her own face buried in my shoulder, preventing me from looking. It wasn't grief, it was stage management. They had all played their parts. I had stood there weeping, throwing dirt onto the casket of a complete stranger, a poor lost woman used as a prop in my wife's monstrous final act. I looked at Shaw, my mind racing, trying to put the last terrible piece into place. But why, I asked, my voice shaking. If she wanted to disappear, if she wanted the $30 million, why the note, why the nurse? My brain was screaming the question. Why tell me she was alive, and why? Why the final line, "Don't trust the children"? Why would she frame Patrick? Why set me on him if she was the master thief? Why would she risk exposing anything? I stood up, my fists clenched on the table. What in God's name was the point of that? I slammed my fist on the laminate table. The impact rattled the flimsy water glasses. But why? I yelled, my voice raw, breaking the sterile silence of the office. Why send the note? Why the nurse? If she had the 30 million, if she was in the Caymans, why not just stay gone? Why risk anything? Why point me at Patrick? Why tell me she was alive? I was pacing now. The room too small, the air too thin. Why frame her own son, Will Harrison? My old friend just shook his head, his face pale and sickened. He looked at Alistair Shaw. The little accountant in his immaculate white shirt seemed completely unfazed by my outburst. He simply pushed his wire-rimmed glasses up the bridge of his nose. Because Shaw said, his voice flat. It wasn't a risk. It was the final move in the chess game. It was, and I must admit it's impressive. It was a genius psychological blow. I stopped pacing. I stared at him, my mind unable to grasp the layers of this betrayal. What in God's name are you talking about? Think Ben will cut in his lawyer's mind, finally catching up to the sheer breathtaking cruelty of it. He stood up, his heavy frame casting an agitated shadow on the wall. She didn't send the note to warn you. She sent the note to activate you. She knows you, Ben. She knows you're stubborn. She knows you're meticulous. She's been married to you for 45 years. She knew with absolute certainty that if you found any hint of a lie, any small crack in the story, you would never, ever let it go. Shaw nodded in agreement, picking up the thread, his voice precise. She wanted you to doubt the closed casket. She wanted you to notice the missing perfume. She wanted you to find that emerald on Julia's throat. She knew you would dig, and she knew what you would find. He tapped the folder that held the details of my son's theft, the 4.5 million. She let Patrick steal that money. Perhaps she even encouraged it subtly. She needed bait. She needed a scapegoat. And Patrick, bless his greedy, foolish heart, built his own gallows. The horror of it was beginning to dawn on me, a cold, dark sunrise. She wanted me to find Patrick's theft, I whispered. She counted on it. Will said, his voice thick with disgust. She used you, Ben. She used your grief as a weapon to destroy your own son. Think of the sequence. Step 1, Evelyn fakes her death and disappears with the real money, the 30 million. Step 2, she plants the note. A note designed to make you suspicious of the only people left. Your children, who conveniently are actually guilty just of a much smaller, clumsier crime. I followed the poisoned logic, my blood turning to ice. Step 3, I whispered. Step 3, Shaw continued. You hire people like us. You dig. You find Patrick's $4.5 million theft. You are consumed with rage at his betrayal. You, the founder, the father, you are the one who exposes him, and then will set his voice low. The full audit begins. The FBI is called in. And they don't just find Patrick's $4.5 million, they find the entire $34.5 million whole. But who is the only logical suspect who has a proven history of theft, who has offshore accounts already set up, who was acting suspiciously and lying about the sale? My son, she was going to frame him for all of it. The 30 million she stole would be pinned on him. He and Julia would go to prison for the rest of their lives, painted as the criminal masterminds who had looted the company, driven it into the ground, and lied to their grieving father. A perfect smoke-ock screen, Will growled, slamming his own fist on the table. The perfect cover story, and then the end game. I looked at him, my mind numb. The endgame, Evelyn Shaw said, tapping the Global Century file in her new anonymous identity as the head of a vulture fund. She steps in. She approaches you, Ben, the grieving widower hour. The man doubly betrayed first by his wife's tragic death and then by his own children's criminal greed. She offers you a generous deal. She offers to buy the bankrupt shell of Carter Logistics for pennies on the dollar. Will Harrison finish the thought? And you, Ben, you'd be grateful. You'd sign. You'd sign anything to be rid of the nightmare. She gets her $30 million, and she gets the entire $300 million company back perfectly clean, legally purchased. And her own son is in a federal prison taking the fall for her crime. It's diabolical. It's the most sociopathic play I've ever seen. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights blurred into a meaningless smear. My wife? The woman I had loved, or thought I loved, for nearly half a century. She wasn't just a thief, she was a monster. A cold, calculating sociopath who would sacrifice her own son, who would use her husband's love and grief as a tool, all for money. I thought about the complexity, the fake Dr. Alistair Finch, the corrupt mortuary, the labyrinth of offshore accounts, the timing, the creation of Global Century, the hiring of the actress. This was too much. This was too intricate for just one person even. I turned back to the two men who were watching me, their faces grim. She didn't do this alone. I said it wasn't a question. The finance, the legal work, the timing. Someone was helping her. Someone on the inside, someone who knew the company as well as I do. Someone who knew me. I looked at Will. She had a partner. She had a lover. I didn't just say it. I felt it. A certainty that settled deep in my bones. A cold, hard knot in the pit of my stomach. She couldn't have done this alone. The legal work, the fake death certificate, the offshore accounts, the creation of Global Century. It's too complex. She had help, someone with power, someone who knew the company as well as I do. Will Harrison, my old friend, was still pacing the small office. A caged lion, his face flushed with rage. She must have, he growled. But who would be that monstrous Alistair Shaw? The accountant remained perfectly still. He had been watching me, his gaze analytical, as if I were a complex puzzle he was slowly solving. He hadn't reacted to the revelation about Evelyn. He had simply absorbed it. "You are correct, Mr. Carter," he said, his voice as quiet and precise as ever. She had a partner, a very capable one, someone who not only had intimate knowledge of Carter Logistics' financials, but also possessed the legal authority and the corporate access to create the very structures needed to siphon $30 million. My blood ran cold. Shaw didn't answer right away. He simply turned a page in his thick black binder. He slid it across the laminate table. I took the liberty of cross-referencing all financial outflows from Evelyn's secret accounts, the $50,000 payment, to the doctor, the $100,000 payment to the mortuary. He pointed to another series of transfers, and these payments for a private Gulf Ream G280 chartered 3 times in the last 6 months to the Cayman Islands, all paid for by one of Evelyn's shell corporations. Who was on the plane? I demanded, my voice a hoarse whisper. The passenger manifest. Shaw said, his voice flat, was very consistent. 2 names every single flight. I leaned forward, my hands bracing me against the table. My eyes scanned the typed lines, my vision blurring. Passenger 1, Carter Evelyn M. Passenger 2, Harrison Daniel. I read the name Harrison. The word hit me like a physical blow. My eyes snapped up, not at the paper, but at the other man in the room. The man who had been my friend, my confidant for 40 years. The man who had brought Shaw into this. The man who was standing right next to me, breathing my air. William Harrison. I felt the room tilt. The blood drained from my face, and a roaring sound filled my ears. "Will," I whispered. It was the only word I could form. "Will you?" My friend's face, which had been red with rage, instantly went white as a sheet. What he stammered. "Ben, what are you?" He lunged forward and grabbed the paper from the table. He stared at the name. Harrison. His face went from shocked to confused to utterly horrified. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a terrible dawning realization. Ben, my God. No, Ben, that is not me. I was frozen, trapped in a fresh hell, my best friend, my ally. Was he the lover? Was this entire investigation, this entire meeting, a setup? A second more terrible trap? My mind was fracturing. Ben, listen to me. Will shouted, grabbing my shoulders. His grip was like steel, shaking me. My name is William Harrison. William Will. Look at the damn paper. Ben, look at the name. It's not me. I tore my eyes from his terrified face and looked back down. My vision was swimming. Harrison? Daniel? Daniel. I said the name, feeling like poison on my tongue. Daniel? Harrison. Yes. Will roared, his voice raw with desperation and fury. Daniel Harrison, the slick $600 an hour kid you hired when you retired. The one Patrick uses for all the corporate legal work. The new blood who told you my methods were outdated, the one who replaced me. It was like a lightning strike. The fog in my head evaporated, replaced by a blinding, terrible clarity. Daniel Harrison, of course, young, ambitious, to the point of ruthlessness. The man I had personally approved 5 years ago because Patrick said the company needed a more modern legal mind. The man I had trusted to finalize the legal side of my retirement. The man I had, in effect, handed the keys of the kingdom to. I sank back into my chair, the strength completely gone from my legs. Daniel, I whispered. He had access to everything, the corporate structure, the trusts, the offshore accounts, he and Evelyn together. They must have started this the moment I walked out the door. He was the legal architect. She was the one with the motive. I looked at Will, my friend. I saw the genuine horror and the sudden profound relief in his eyes. In my shock, I had just accused him. Will, I am sorry I didn't. Don't be... He growled, turning away, his hands clenching and unclenching. The bastard has my last name. Now I'm really going to enjoy this. I took a deep breath, my mind finally catching up. But there was one last piece, one final, terrifying piece that didn't fit. I looked at the third man in the room, the quiet, precise little accountant, Alistair Shaw. Alistair. He had been watching this entire exchange with the detached, cool curiosity of a scientist observing a chemical reaction. He hadn't said a word. A new cold dread pierced through my shock. Shaw? I said, my voice barely audible. Daniel Harrison, the man who designed this entire corporate structure. The man who needed a scapegoat. The man who, according to your theory, needed an accountant, a bloodhound to find Patrick's $4. 5 million theft, and only that theft. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. He met my gaze without blinking. And you, Shaw, did Daniel Harrison hire you? The question hung in the stale, recycled air of the office. Did Daniel Harrison hire you? I asked. My voice was flat. I felt nothing. No shock, no more anger, just a deep, bottomless exhaustion. If Shaw said yes, it was over. Will and I were alone, trapped in a room with a man who had been feeding us a perfectly crafted narrative. A man who was likely recording this very conversation for Daniel and Evelyn. We were fools. Old, trusting fools. Will Harrison must have realized it at the same time. He took a half step toward Shaw, his big body tensing, his hands curling into fists. Shaw, you son of a Alistair. Shaw didn't flinch. He didn't look at Will's threatening posture. He just looked at me, his gaze level over the top of his wire-rimmed glasses. Yes, he said. The word was quiet, devastating. I sank back into my chair. It was over. The whole thing, the investigation, the alliance, it was all part of Evelyn and Daniel's sociopathic play. They hadn't just faked a death and framed their son. They had orchestrated my discovery of it, complete with a hand-picked accountant, to guide me to all the wrong conclusions. to make me think I was fighting back when I was really just digging my own grave. They had even accounted for my friendship with Will, letting him be the one to hire the bloodhound, making me feel safe. You've been working for them, I whispered. This whole night? This has been a Mr. Carter. Shaw interrupted, his voice sharp, for the first time cutting through my despair. Please do not insult my intelligence. Yes, Daniel Harrison hired me, and in doing so, he made the single most arrogant and catastrophic mistake of his entire grubby life. Will stopped his fist halfway to the table. What Daniel Harrison hired me, Shaw repeated, for a very specific, very limited task. His instructions, which I still have in the original encrypted email, were precise. Conduct a preliminary audit. You are to focus exclusively on the Shell Corporation's synergy analysis and logistics expediting partners. You are to confirm the $4.5 million theft. You are to trace it to Patrick Carter. And then, Mr. Shaw, you are to stop. He let that sink in. He thought I was a tool. Shaw said, a flicker of deep professional offense in his voice. A simple bean counter, a hired gun who would take his money, do the simple math, and hand over a report that he could then leak to the authorities. He thought I was stupid. He thought I was manageable. He leaned forward, the most emotion I'd seen from him yet. I am not a bean counter, Mr. Carter. I am a forensic accountant. I have uncovered fraud in 3 of the Fortune 500 companies, and I do not stop just because a client tells me to. He took a breath. The $4.5 million. It was, as I said, clumsy. It was amateurish. It was too obvious. It was a blazing neon sign pointing straight at Patrick Carter, screaming, "Look at me, I am the thief." And that bothered me. Why build such an elaborate shell game only to leave such a simple, obvious trail? So I kept digging on my own time off the clock. I went around the parameters Daniel set. I followed the other drains, the ones he hadn't told me about. I held my breath. And that, Shaw said, is when I found her. The real theft, the $30 million, it wasn't routed through the same accounts, but it was parallel, using similar names, similar jurisdictions. It was brilliant. A perfect, clean, professional siphoning designed to be invisible. And Patrick's $4.5 million, it was the noise. The smokescreen designed to be found, designed to explain the company's collapse. It was disgusting. So what did you do? Will asked, his voice low, realizing what Shaw was saying. I knew I was being used, Shaw said. I was the instrument Daniel was going to use to legally crucify Patrick, to hand the FBI a solved case, all while the real criminals, he and Evelyn, walked away with the real money. I don't like being a tool, Mr. Carter, and I despise corrupt lawyers far more than I despise clumsy, greedy children. He finally closed his thick black binder. So I made a call. Not to Daniel, not to you. I couldn't trust who was in on it. I called the only other person I knew was independent. I called Leo Vance. My mind exploded. You've been working with Leo for the past week, Shaw confirmed. Leo's been tracking the people. I've been tracking the money. We've been comparing notes every night. We fed Daniel Harrison a stream of useless updates on the Patrick investigation, all while we were building the real case. The one against him, the one against Evelyn, the note. Your nurse heard Leo's team was there in that parking garage recording the entire exchange. We knew Global Sentry was the key. A wave of relief so profound it almost made me sick washed over me. I wasn't alone. I had never been alone. I had a team, a real one. My loyalty isn't to the man who pays my invoice. Mr. Carter. Shaw said, his quiet voice filling the room. My loyalty is to the numbers, and the numbers told me you were the victim, and they were the enemy. Will Harrison finally sat down, letting out a breath that sounded like it had been held for 40 years. He looked at me. He looked at Shaw. My God, he whispered. So what now? The 3 of us sat there, the air thick with the smell of ozone, like the aftermath of a lightning strike. The lines were finally truly drawn. The enemy was clear. Evelyn Daniel Harrison and my son and daughter-in-law, the fools who had started this, all the puppets in their mother's sociopathic play. I looked at the glossy fake report Patrick had given me, the one detailing the generous offer from Global Century, the one that was supposed to be signed on Monday. I picked up my phone. I looked at Shaw. I looked at Will. They still need my signature, I said. My voice wasn't weak anymore. It was cold. It was hard. It was the voice of the man who had built Carter Logistics from 2 trucks and a cloud of dust. It's time to end this play. I looked at Will. I looked at Shaw. The pieces were all on the table. A horrifying, shattered mosaic of my life. Evelyn Daniel Harrison and my own son Patrick, the greedy, foolish puppet they had so expertly manipulated. The rage was still there, a white-hot coal in my chest, but it had burned clean. It was no longer the wild, confused anger of a victim. It was the cold, focused anger of a predator. They had used my love as a weapon. They had used my grief as a smoke screen. Now I would use their greed as a trap. They still need my signature. I said again, the words tasting like metal. All of this, the 30 million, the fake death, the frame-up, none of it works unless I Benjamin Carter the grieving widower hour sign over my company to Global Century Holdings. They need my signature to launder the whole damn operation. Will Harrison nodded, his face grim. They're trying to buy a $300 million company for pennies, Ben. They're not just stealing from you. They're trying to get you to give them the rest. They need your blessing to make the crime legal. Then I'll give it to them, I said. I pulled the burner phone from my pocket. I looked at the number for Patrick. My finger hovered over the contact. I'll be the confused, broken-hearted old man they're counting on. I'll be the biggest fool they've ever seen. I took a deep breath, let my shoulders slump, and intentionally let a tremor enter my hand. I put the phone on speaker. Will and Shaw leaned in, their expressions intense. I pressed the call button. It rang once, twice. He picked up on the 3rd ring. Dad. His voice was cautious, wary. He was expecting another confrontation. Patrick, I said. I let my voice crack. I let a long, ragged, shaky breath wheeze out of me. Patrick, son, Dad, are you okay? Where are you? He asked, the impatience barely concealed beneath a thin veneer of concern. I'm at the house, I lied. I've been sitting here in the study looking at the pictures. I paused, letting him fill the silence, letting him imagine me weeping over old photo albums. Son, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry about before at the house. I wasn't myself. I heard it. A small, almost inaudible sigh. Relief. He was relaxing. It's okay, Dad, he said, his voice softening, shifting instantly into that patronizing, reasonable tone. I told you it's the grief. It's a lot to process. We understand. No, son, I said, my voice thick with fake emotion. You were right. You were right about everything. I sniffed a wet, pathetic sound I'd practiced in my head. I'm just so tired with your mother gone. These numbers. I let my voice trail off into a helpless mumble. I can't fight anymore, Patrick. I can't. This time the sigh of relief from his end was loud and clear. It was the sound of a man who had just won. Dad, it's okay. It's all okay. I'll handle everything. I told you I would. I know, son. I know, I whispered. You do what you have to do. Just sell it. Sell the company. I said the words that must have been music to his ears. I'll sign whatever you need. I trust you. You're right. I'm just too old for this. I'm too tired to understand. Thank you, Dad. He said, his voice brimming with a sudden sickening warmth. Thank you. You're doing the right thing. I promise I'll make sure you're taken care of. You won't have to worry about a thing. I held up my hand, signaling to Will and Shaw. Now came the real test. The hook? Patrick? I said, injecting a new note of frail, childlike panic. Yes, Dad, I'm right here. The papers, the signing. I don't want to do it here in the house. There are too many memories of your mother. It's too hard. Oh, okay. Well, I can bring them to you? Or we can go to Daniel's office. He offered a little too quickly. Of course he wanted to go to his co-conspirator's office. No, I said. No, I want to do it at the office. At the company. What, the office? Why, his voice was sharp again. The suspicion returning instantly. The main conference room. I stammered, painting the picture for him. The big one, where we signed the first Apex contract, where it all started. It feels right to end it there. He was quiet for a long moment. I could hear him thinking, weighing the risk. I don't know, Dad. It's a lot of hassle. Daniel's office is all set up. And one more thing, son, I said, pushing my advantage, my voice trembling with my silly old man's request. The buyers, the global century people. I still want to meet them. Just to shake their hands, please, Patrick. I need to see who's taking over. I need to know my life's work, my legacy is going to good people. Your mother, Evelyn? She always said you can tell a man's worth by his handshake. I won't be able to rest. I won't be able to sign unless I can just look them in the eye. I had trapped him. He couldn't refuse without breaking the illusion, without revealing that the buyers were phantoms he couldn't produce. But I knew, and Shaw knew, that Evelyn and Daniel had representatives, lawyers, frontmen. They could be produced. Patrick let out a long, heavy, frustrated sigh. He was annoyed. This was an unnecessary complication, a sentimental old fool's demand. But I was the man with the pen. Okay. He finally bit out his patience, clearly gone. Okay, Dad, fine. We'll do it your way. The main conference room, and I'll get the representatives from Global Century to be there so you can shake their hands. Fine. Oh, thank you, son. I wept into the phone. You're a good boy. Thank you. Yes, Dad. Just be there. Monday morning, 10 a.m. and just be ready to sign. I will, son. I promise. 10 a.m. I hung up the phone. The tremor in my hand vanished. I looked at Will. I looked at Shaw. My eyes were cold and clear. They took the bait. I said, Monday, 10 a.m., our conference room. I turned to Shaw. Get Leo and his team. I want that room wired for sound and video. I want every single word recorded. I turn to Will and you. You call the FBI. Tell them the signing party is on. The walk from the elevator to the main conference room felt like a mile. This was my territory. The 30th floor headquarters of Carter Logistics. The thick gray carpet, the walls of glass overlooking the Cleveland skyline, the faint smell of lemon oil on the mahogany trim. I had chosen every detail. Now I walked through it as a ghost, a condemned man being led to his own execution. I leaned heavily on the cane Will Harrison had brought for me. It was a solid, heavy piece of oak, a prop that felt strangely appropriate. I let my hand tremble. I let my shoulders slump. While my oldest friend played his part perfectly, his hand protectively on my elbow, guiding me as if I were a frail piece of glass. Easy does it, Ben. He muttered loud enough for Patrick's secretary to hear. We're almost there. I just nodded, my face a mask of weary, confused grief. The heavy glass doors to the conference room were open. They were waiting. It was a tableau of my betrayal. Patrick, my son, stood at the head of the table, my chair. He was wearing a crisp, celebratory blue suit, looking every bit the conquering CEO. Beside him, Julia, my daughter-in-law, was radiant in a cream-colored dress, my mother's emerald blazing at her throat like a drop of poison. She looked like she was attending a christening, not the dissolution of her father-in-law's life's work. She was practically vibrating with anticipation. And then there was Daniel Harrison, the traitor. He wasn't at the head of the table. He was pacing by the window, a shark in an $8,000 suit, projecting an aura of absolute arrogant control. Beside him, seated and silent, were two men in identical gray suits. Their faces were blank. Their briefcases were closed. The representatives from Global Century Holdings, the pawns. Dad. Patrick boomed, his voice full of false booming heartiness as I shuffled in. You made it wonderful. Come sit down. Will guided me to a chair near the end of the table. Coffee, Dad? Water. Patrick fussed. Just some water, son. I whispered, my voice ready. Thank you. Let's just get this over with. I'm very tired. I watched Julia's eyes dart to Daniel, a quick, almost imperceptible flicker of get on with it. She couldn't wait to get her hands on the money. Of course, Dad, Patrick said, sitting down, rubbing his hands together. We're all here for you, Daniel. Why don't you walk Dad through the final summary? Keep it simple. Keep it simple. As if I were a child. Daniel Harrison finally stopped pacing and took his seat, his movements smooth like oil. He slid a thick leather-bound document across the polished mahogany. It stopped perfectly right in front of me. It's very simple, Ben, he said, his voice a smooth, confident baritone. As we all discussed, the company is unfortunately insolvent. The debt load from the canceled contracts combined with the unexpected estate tax burden. He paused, offering a small, sympathetic frown. Well, it's just too much. The numbers are catastrophic. I stared at the cover of the document. I didn't open it. This agreement, Daniel continued, tapping the leather, is a lifeline. A miracle, frankly. Global Century Holdings. He gestured to the two gray suits who nodded once in unison, has agreed to absorb all the debt, every penny. They take on the assets, the trucks, the properties, and in return, they are providing a very generous seven-figure payout directly to you personally, Ben, tax-free. He smiled a wide, benevolent reptilian smile. It's the cleanest, best-case scenario. You're free. You're protected. All this stress. He pushed the document a final inch toward my hand. It all just goes away. Just sign, Dad. Patrick urged, his voice tight with an excitement he couldn't hide. For Mom, for all of us. Just sign it and it's over. Sign it, Ben. Julia echoed, her voice a soft, poisonous coo. You've earned your rest. I looked at them. My son, my daughter-in-law, my lawyer, the unholy trinity of my destruction. I looked at Will, who was watching me, his face a mask of stone. I looked at the gray suits. I looked at the signature line. Benjamin Carter, founder. I uncapped the heavy gold-plated pen Daniel had so helpfully provided. I saw Patrick lean forward, his entire body tensed. I saw Julia hold her breath, her eyes fixed on the tip of the pen. I saw Daniel Harrison lean back in his chair, folding his arms, victorious. The ringmaster who had just tamed the old senile lion. I put the pen to the paper. The room was utterly silent. Okay, I whispered. My hand trembled. Just one last question. Patrick let out an audible, frustrated sigh. Dad, please just sign the paper. No. This is, I said, looking up not at Patrick, but at the man who had orchestrated everything. This is for you, Daniel. Daniel Harrison raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. The old man had one last feeble question. Yes, Ben. I let the frail, confused mask drop from my face. I let the tremor in my hand stop. I looked him right in the eye, and for the first time in 5 years, I let the cold, hard steel of the founder show. My voice was no longer weak. It was quiet. It was clear. And it was deadly. One last question, Daniel. How was your trip to the Caymans with Evelyn? The room didn't just go quiet, it died. The air pressure changed, sucking all sound, all motion, all life out of that 32nd floor conference room. Patrick froze his hand, which had been reaching for a celebratory glass of water, stopped midair. Julia's bright, anticipatory smile cracked and solidified, turning into a grotesque mask of confusion. The two gray suits from Global Century looked at each other, then at Daniel, suddenly realizing they were in a room where something had gone terribly, terribly wrong. And Daniel Harrison. The blood didn't just drain from his face, it vanished. He went from a confident, slick $8,000 suit lawyer to a cornered rat in the span of a single heartbeat. His face was a waxy, pale, yellowish white. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a pure, primal terror. What Patrick finally choked out his voice, a strangled whisper. What did you just say?" He looked at me as if I'd started speaking in tongues. He looked at Daniel, then back at me. He laughed a short, sharp, hysterical bark. "Dad, what is wrong with you? That's sick." "Why would you say that Mom is dead? Is she?" I roared my voice, no longer weak, booming off the glass walls, making everyone flinch. I stood up, kicking the heavy oak chair back, throwing the prop cane to the floor. The frail old man was gone. "Is she dead, Patrick? Or is she in the Caymans with him?" I pointed a shaking, accusing finger straight at Daniel Harrison. "Mom is alive." I shouted, the force of the words shocking even myself. She faked her death. She faked her funeral. She paid off the doctor. She paid off the mortuary. She put a stranger's body in that casket. "Ben, stop." Julia shrieked, her hands flying to her ears. "You're insane. You're senile, Patrick. He's lost his mind." "I haven't lost anything," I snarled, turning on her. "But you're about to." I pointed at Patrick. "She's alive, son. And while you and your wife were busy stealing $4.5 million, she and her lover." I jabbed my finger back at Daniel. "We're stealing $30 million right under your nose." "They've been playing you. They've been playing all of us." Patrick looked at Daniel, his face a mask of utter confusion. "Daniel, what? What is he talking about? And the best part, Patrick?" I continued, my voice dripping with the venom I'd held back for weeks. "The masterpiece she framed you? She sent me the note. She pointed me to your pathetic, clumsy theft, knowing I would dig. She used me, her grieving husband, as a weapon to put you, her son, in prison for all of it. For the entire $34 million, she and Daniel were going to walk away with the company and the cash, while you and Julia rotted in a cell." "No," Patrick whispered, sinking into his chair. No. Julia, however, wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Patrick, her face white with a new dawning horror. What, $4.5 million? She whispered, her voice like ice. "Patrick, what is he talking about? What $4.5 million did we steal?" That was it, the final beautiful implosion. Even the accomplices were lying to each other. Daniel Harrison knew the game was up. His plan, years in the making, had just evaporated. He didn't speak, he didn't beg. He acted. With a primal scream of rage, he grabbed the heavy, polished mahogany conference table, my table, and flipped it. The 2-ton piece of wood crashed onto its side, sending binders, laptops, and water glasses smashing onto the floor. It was a barricade, a violent, desperate act of chaos. "Run!" he screamed at the 2 gray suits, shoving one of them toward the door. For a second, it was anarchy. Patrick and Julia screamed, cowering against the wall. Daniel lunged for the exit, but the heavy glass doors didn't open. They were pushed in. 3 men in dark suits, led by the unmistakable world-weary face of Leo Vance, blocked the doorway. Behind them, 6 more men fanned out. "FBI, nobody move." Leo's voice was calm, but it had the authority of a freight train. "Daniel Harrison, you are under arrest." 2 agents grabbed the struggling, screaming lawyer. Another agent cuffed the two Global Century representatives who had their hands up before Leo even finished his sentence. Patrick and Julia were huddled by the window weeping. "Wait!" Julia shrieked. "We're the victims! We're the victims too!" He stole from us." An agent moved toward them. "Patrick Carter, Julia Carter. You are also under arrest for embezzlement and conspiracy to defraud." "No," Patrick yelled. "You can't, Dad." "Dad, tell them. Tell them we were just—" I looked at my son, his face streaked with tears, his world ending. "You were just what Patrick thieves or fools. Turns out you were both." Will Harrison, my old friend, stepped out from behind the agents. He walked over to the wreckage of the conference table and picked up a small black object from the floor, a high-fidelity microphone. He held it up for Daniel Harrison to see as the agents hauled him past. "It's all recorded, Daniel." Will said, his voice full of righteous, satisfying fury. "Every word from insolvent to Caymans. We got it all. You sociopathic bastard." As they led Patrick and Julia out cuffed and sobbing, Leo Vance walked over to me. He put a hand on my shoulder. His gaze was steady, respectful. "It's over, Ben." "Evelyn." I asked the last piece of the puzzle. "We got the alert from our Cayman contact an hour ago. Leo said she tried to liquidate the Global Century accounts the second this meeting was confirmed. She must have gotten spooked. They arrested her at the airport in Grand Cayman. She had 2 first-class tickets to Zurich and $3 million in diamonds in her carry-on. It was over. Truly, finally over. My wife, my son, my daughter-in-law, my lawyer, all of them gone. I stood in the ruins of my conference room, the room where I'd built my empire. And for the first time in 45 years, I was completely, utterly alone. 1 month, 30 days since the sound of those handcuffs clicking shut had echoed in my conference room. 30 days since my world ended and began again. I sat in my old CEO chair, but the leather felt cold, alien. The office, once my fortress, now felt like a tomb. The phones on my desk never stopped ringing. I didn't answer them. I let my new skeletal staff handle the barrage. It was always the same. Clients furious canceling contracts. Vendors terrified demanding payment up front. The FBI had frozen all the primary accounts, the ones Daniel and Evelyn had poisoned with their $30 million theft. Even the accounts Patrick had touched were locked tight. We were paralyzed. We were hemorrhaging. We were dying. I was 70 years old, and I was back at work trying to make payroll for 2,000 employees with nothing but my reputation, and that too was in tatters. The news had been relentless. Carter heir arrested. Logistics empire implodes. Carter matriarch arrested in Caymans, trying to flee. My name, my legacy, all of it dragged through the mud by the very people I had built it for. I was no longer the grieving widower. I was the fool, the senile old man who had let it all happen under his own roof. The door to my office opened without a knock. I didn't even look up. I was staring at a legal notice threatening to seize half our fleet. "They're canceling the Apex contract." "A Lister?" I said, my voice sounding like gravel. "The one I built this company on." A Lister Shaw walked in. He was no longer just the forensic accountant. He was the only man on earth I trusted with my money. I had made him the new chief financial officer 2 weeks ago. He placed a thin black binder on my desk, right on top of the legal notice. He ignored my comment about Apex. "They can't cancel it, Ben. I spoke to their counsel this morning. I sent them the proof, the wiretapped recordings, your deposition. They know you were the target, not the accomplice. They're staying." I looked up hope, a small, dangerous flicker. "And the accounts. The U.S. Attorney's Office has unfrozen our primary operating capital." Shaw said, his voice flat. "All business. They've officially classified you as the primary victim in the case. We can make payroll." He sat down, opening the binder. "But now we must assess the real damage." He slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. It wasn't a colorful fake graph from Patrick. It was a column of stark black and white numbers. "It's bad," Shaw said. He didn't sugarcoat. He wasn't that kind of man. The combined theft, the assets, Daniel locked away the canceled contracts from the initial panic. "We've lost 35%. He paused, letting the number sink in. 35% of my life's work. Gone. Evaporated by my own wife and son. "We are deeply wounded, Ben, but we are not dead." I stared at the number. "So what now?" "Now," Shaw said, turning the page. "We rebuild. I've already structured the refinancing. We sell the redundant assets. The corporate jet Evelyn bought the condo in Miami. We consolidate the routes. We cut the fat. It will be difficult. It will take 2, maybe 3 years to be stable again." He looked at me, a rare flicker of something human in his analytical eyes. "But we still stand, Ben. The company is still yours. It's still standing." He left me alone with that one small piece of hope. We still stand. I leaned back in my chair. My eyes drifted to the one thing on my desk I hadn't touched: a silver-framed photograph. It was from 5 years ago at my retirement party. Me, Evelyn, Patrick, and Julia all smiling. The perfect, happy, successful family. A fiction. A lie captured in silver. I looked at Evelyn's smiling face, the woman I had shared a bed with for 45 years. The woman who had faked her own death to frame her son and steal my life. I picked up the heavy frame. I looked at her, searching for a clue, for a hint of the monster I now knew. I saw nothing but the beautiful mask she had worn her entire life. I opened the trash can by my desk and I dropped the photograph inside. The sound of the glass shattering against the metal bottom was the most satisfying sound I had heard in a month. My desk was clean. My life was not. I started sorting through the mountain of mail bills, legal threats, and then I saw it, a single envelope different from the rest. It was thin, cheap paper. The return address was the Cuyahoga County Justice Center. It was addressed to me in clumsy, shaky handwriting I recognized instantly. It was from Patrick. My heart, which I thought had turned to stone, gave a painful, stupid lurch. I tore it open. The note inside was short, almost childlike. "Dad, I know you hate me. I know I deserve it, but please, can I see you just once? I didn't want to go." The letter sat on the polished surface of my new desk for 3 days. A small, ugly stain of cheap paper and desperate, shaky handwriting. "Dad, please. Can I see you?" I had thrown Evelyn's picture in the trash, but Patrick was my son. My blood. Will Harrison, my old friend, had been firm. "You don't go for him, Ben," he'd said over the phone, his voice gruff. "He's a lost cause. You go for you. You go to close the door, you go to hear it, and then you go to walk away. Otherwise, this thing, it will haunt you." He was right. So I went. The Cuyahoga County Justice Center wasn't a prison. Not really. It was a massive, modern concrete box resigned to hold human misery. The air inside smelled of industrial bleach, stale sweat, and defeat. I walked through the metal detectors, my new leather shoes squeaking on the polished linoleum. I was a different man than the one who had shuffled into a diner 2 months ago. I was wearing a tailored suit, I was healthy, I was rich, and I was completely, utterly broken inside. A guard led me down a long gray corridor to the non-cont visitation room. It was exactly as dreadful as you'd imagine. A long counter bisected by a thick, smeared pane of glass, a row of cheap plastic stools. I sat down on my side. I waited. A heavy door buzzed open on the other side, and 2 men in orange jumpsuits shuffled in. One of them was my son. He wasn't the proud, arrogant CEO in the $8,000 suit anymore. He wasn't the man who had patted my head and called me old man. He was just inmate 70749B. The bright orange fabric hung off his frame. He was thinner. His face was pale and pasty. His expensive haircut was gone, replaced by greasy, unkempt hair. He looked small. He looked older than me. He saw me, and his face crumpled. He slid onto the stool, his hands, which I realized were cuffed to a chain around his waist, trembling. He fumbled with the black telephone receiver on the wall. I picked up my own. Boom! The static hissed in my ear. He put his forehead against the cold glass, his eyes squeezed shut, and just wept. A dry, ragged, choking sound. Dad. He sobbed, his voice tinny over the line. Dad, I waited. I felt nothing. The rage I had anticipated, the satisfaction, the pain, it was all gone. There was just a vast, cold void, a hollowed-out space where my love for him used to be. He couldn't look at me. He just kept weeping. I didn't come here for tears. I didn't come here for apologies. I came for an answer. Why my voice was quiet, but in the small, dead room, it sounded like a gunshot. Why Patrick? He flinched as if I had struck him. He finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and terrified awash in self-pity. I don't know, he stammered. You don't know? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. You stole $4.5 million from my company. You lied to my face. You conspired with your mother to let her frame you for $30 million more. You were going to let me sign away my entire life's work, and you don't know. No, I mean it. It was me. He blurted out, the confession spilling from him, pathetic and weak. I was jealous, Dad. Okay. I was always jealous of you. I just stared at him. You built everything. He cried, his voice rising. Carter Logistics. It was always your company, your legacy. I was just your son, the guy you handed the keys to. I had to prove I was smarter than you. That I could beat you. That I deserved it. So you stole from me to prove you were smarter. It started small. He rushed the words, tumbling out. A few thousand here and there, just to feel like I had something that was mine. But Julia, she kept pushing. She wanted the bigger house. She wanted the vacations. She said I deserved it. She said I was the one doing all the work, and you were just sitting there retired judging me. She said I should take what was mine. He was still blaming his wife. Blaming me. So you and Julia, I said, my voice flat. You did this, yes? No. I mean, he was frantic now, his eyes wide. The $4.5 million. Yes, that was us. That was stupid. Dad, I know it was stupid. But the other stuff, the $30 million, the fake death, Mom approached us. Dad, I swear to God, she came to us weeks before she died. I stared at him. This was new. This was the final, pathetic layer of his cowardice. She was the one who found out I was skimming. Patrick choked out. She caught me. She had the bank records. I thought she was going to tell you. I thought my life was over. But she didn't. He looked up, his face a mask of twisted confusion. She smiled. Dad? She said you were the real problem. What I whispered. She said you were losing it. Patrick wept. That you were becoming senile. That you were making bad deals from your retirement chair, threatening to bankrupt the company. She said you were the one draining the accounts, that you were the danger. My God. She had been testing the senile story on him first. She had been plotting this for months. She told us you were the enemy, Dad? Patrick cried, his voice breaking. She showed us papers. They must have been forged. I see that now, she said. She said the only way to protect our inheritance, to protect the family legacy from you, was to drain the accounts faster, to take that $4.5 million and hide it offshore. She called it securing our legacy. She said she had a plan to save all of us from you. I looked at my son, a 45-year-old man, a graduate of Wharton, reduced to this whimpering, gullible fool. He was still, even now, still blaming everyone else. He blamed Julia for his greed. He blamed Evelyn for his stupidity. He blamed me for his jealousy. He had learned nothing. He would never take responsibility. He was pathetic. So you believed her? I said it wasn't a question. You believed a story that I, the man who built a $300 million company, was suddenly losing it and bankrupting it. You believed that because you wanted to. She was my mother, he cried. She said she was protecting us. She played you, Patrick. I said, my voice empty of all emotion. She needed a scapegoat. She needed a fool. And you volunteered. She played you like a cheap fiddle, using your own greed and your own jealousy against you. She conned you. I stood up. The plastic stool scraped loudly against the linoleum floor. Patrick looked up, his face white with panic. Dad. Wait, please. I'm sorry. I'm your son. I looked down at him one last time. Inmate 7749B. The man who had my face but none of my character. She conned you, Patrick. I repeated, my voice like stone. And you conned me. We're done. I placed the receiver gently back onto its hook, cutting off his next word. Dad. No, please. His voice was a muffled, distant scream through the thick, smeared glass. He started pounding on it, his cuffed hands making a dull, heavy thud. Don't leave me, please. I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't look back. I turned and I walked steadily down the gray corridor. I walked past the guards, my footsteps echoing. I walked through the sliding metal doors, through the metal detectors, and out into the bright, cold afternoon sun. And for the first time in my entire 70 years, I felt completely, utterly, and blessedly light. It was over. I was free. 6 months, half a year since I walked out of that gray concrete box and left my son sitting behind the glass. The air today is different. It's crisp. It doesn't smell like bleach and defeat. It smells like wet pavement, ozone, and new machinery. I am 70 years old, and I am standing in a warehouse, not a prison visiting room. This is one of my warehouses, Bay 7, the one Patrick had tried to sell off for parts. Today it's alive. It echoes with the sounds of my company, my real company. I am not shuffling. I am not leaning on a prop cane. I am holding a digital clipboard, and my hand is perfectly steady. A massive, gleaming white electric C, its paint so bright it hurts. The eyes hums quietly beside me. It's one of 10. 10 brand new state-of-the-art trucks. I am signing the digital delivery confirmation. That's the last of them, Ben. Alistair Shaw. My new chief financial officer walks up beside me. He's wearing the same precise, muted gray suit, but he looks different here in the bright fluorescent light of the warehouse. He looks satisfied. The board was nervous about this capital expenditure. 10 trucks is an aggressive move right now. The board can be nervous, I say, signing my name with a firm, decisive stroke. You don't grow by hiding in a hole, Alistair. You grow by moving forward. We lost 35% of our value. I intend to get it back with interest. Shaw allows himself one of his rare, thin smiles. We're already recovering faster than anyone expected, Ben. Much faster. He taps his own tablet, showing me a screen of green, upward trending lines. The Apex contract. Not only did they not cancel, I just finalized a new agreement. They've increased their freight volume by 20%. I nod. Trust. It's the only currency that actually matters. And the new clients, I asked, the ones who got scared off by the scandal. They're coming back, Shaw confirms. Slowly, but they're returning, and new ones are calling. They know Carter Logistics is under its original management. They know the founder is back at the helm. He looks at me, his analytical gaze softening for just a fraction of a second. They trust you, Ben. They trust you. The words hang in the air. It's the one thing I fought for. The one thing I saved from the wreckage. I look out over the vast, cavernous loading bay. My company, my legacy, I saved it. But the cost. My God, the cost. I turn away from Shaw, looking out the high bay doors at the Cleveland skyline. I didn't just lose a percentage of my company, I lost everything else. My entire constructed 45-year life. It wasn't a reorganization, it was an amputation. My son Patrick is in a medium security federal prison in Pennsylvania. He took a plea deal after I testified, 12 years. He'll be almost 60 when he gets out. His letters still come once a month forwarded by the prison. Thin envelopes with his shaky handwriting. I haven't opened the last 3. I hear he's working in the prison library, a fitting place for a man who believed his own fictions. Julia, his wife. She also took a deal. She testified against everyone, Patrick, Daniel, and Evelyn, to save herself. She got 5 years with probation after 2. She's probably already planning her next move, searching for her next victim. And Evelyn, my wife, the love of my life, the woman who faked her own death. She fought. She and Daniel Harrison fought extradition from the Caymans with a team of ruthless, expensive lawyers. But Shaw's evidence was too perfect. The money trail was too clean. The wiretapped recordings were undeniable. They were both found guilty. Conspiracy, bank fraud, mail fraud, falsifying a death certificate, a crime so bizarre, the judge seemed personally offended. Evelyn got 25 years, Daniel got 20, she will die in prison. So here I am, 70 years old, a widower, to a woman who isn't dead, a father to a son who is. I am in every sense of the word alone. But I am not broken. I look at Shaw, this quiet, precise man, who, along with Will and Leo, saved me. He's my new family. The truth is my family now. Good, I say, handing him back the clipboard. What's next on the agenda? Shaw raises an eyebrow. Ben, it's 3:00 p.m. You've been here since 5:00 a.m. The agenda is you go home. You rest. You're 70 years old, for God's sake. I laugh. It's a real laugh. A sound that feels foreign but good. Rest, I say, walking past the line of new, gleaming white trucks. I rested for 5 years, a Leicester. I let my son handle it. Look where that got me. No, I'm not retiring. Not now. Not ever. I am starting over. At 70 years old, I am starting from scratch. But I'm not starting with nothing. I am starting with 45 years of experience. I am starting with the knowledge of exactly who my friends are. And I know with surgical precision exactly who my enemies are. I will never be senile again. I will never be confused. I will never, ever trust blindly. My name, Benjamin Carter, is on the side of these trucks. And this time my legacy will continue. But it will continue my way. The lesson here is crystal clear. The cruelest betrayal always comes from the ones you love the most. They will exploit your trust, see your age as silly, and use your own love against you. Never mistake kindness for weakness. Always be vigilant. When your gut tells you something is wrong, act. Sometimes you must secretly investigate the truth to protect your legacy. Trust must be verified. Have you ever been stabbed in the back by the people closest to you? What would you do if you uncovered such a cruel plot? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Hit like and subscribe to the channel to follow the next stories.